There is a unique magic to Halloween night. It's a collective, sanctioned escape from the mundane, an evening where we willingly dance with the macabre, savoring the delicious thrill of a controlled scare. The shadows become playful, the monsters are made of rubber and latex, and the only thing that should be bleeding is a bag of cherry punch. We create a world where fear is a commodity, packaged and consumed for fun. But what happens when the line between this manufactured fantasy and brutal reality doesn't just blur, but shatters? When the monster at the door isn't wearing a mask you can peel off? Welcome, everyone, to a special investigation into the long, dark shadows cast by Halloween's fleeting glow. To all of you joining from across the globe, whether you're in a bustling metropolis or a quiet, sleepy town not unlike the ones we'll discuss today, I want you to take a moment. Consider the street you live on, the simple rituals of your daily life. Now, imagine them fractured forever. The world is full of stories waiting to be understood, and some of the most profound are written in tragedy. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always genuinely fascinated by the incredible reach of this community. Tonight, we are descending into the darkness. We're delving into cases where October 31st wasn't a date circled on the calendar for fun, but a permanent, bloody marker of unimaginable tragedy. These are stories where the suffering was terrifyingly real, the fear was absolute and paralyzing, and the consequences echoed through families and communities for decades, leaving scars that never truly heal. Our journey begins in a place synonymous with beauty, luxury, and tranquility, California's Napa Valley. Picture rolling hills draped in vineyards, the air crisp and scented with earth and ripening grapes. In 2004, in a peaceful, tree-lined suburb where the biggest concern was often the price of a good Cabernet, a modest house on Dorset Street became a sanctuary for three young women, each standing at the precipice of a bright, promise-filled future. There was Maya Sharma, a 26-year-old civil engineer for the city of Napa. To call Maya brilliant and resilient would be an understatement. She was a force of will. As a teenager, a horrific, head-on collision had left her with a traumatic brain injury. Doctors had prepared her family for the worst, her survival itself termed a miracle. But Maya didn't just survive. She fought. Through months of grueling rehabilitation, she reclaimed her cognitive functions, her motor skills, her very life. She fought her way to a scholarship, graduated at the top of her engineering class, and landed a respected job. She was the embodiment of perseverance, a young woman who had stared into the abyss and not only looked back, but fought her way back into the light, stronger and more determined. Her roommate, Chloe Bennett, was a 27-year-old vibrant and fiercely loyal political science graduate who coached volleyball at a local community college. Where Maya was introspective and driven, Chloe was the social anchor of the house, her bright smile and infectious, easy laugh filling the halls with warmth. She was the steady, reliable one, the friend you could call at 3 a.m. without a second thought, the organizer of movie nights and the mediator of minor squabbles. The third resident was Isabel Du Bois, 25, who had fled the humid warmth of a small Louisiana town for a new beginning. Back home, Isabel had been a local pageant queen, but she used her crown not for vanity, but as a platform to raise thousands of dollars for charities supporting at-risk children. After a painful, soul-crushing breakup, she packed her bags and her boundless optimism, finding solace and employment at a prestigious Napa Valley winery. She was the dreamer, the one who still believed in silver linings, determined to rebuild her life from the ground up, one sun-drenched Napa day at a time. Together they built a life. It was a life of shared meals where they debated politics and dreamed aloud, of minor roommate squabbles over unwashed dishes and unannounced boyfriends, and of the quiet, unshakable comfort of a friendship forged in the daily rhythms of shared existence. On Halloween night 2004, their plans were simple, safe, and quintessentially domestic. A chill, evening handing out candy to the neighborhood children from a large communal bowl. They had no parties to attend, no reason to venture into the night. As the last trick-or-treaters, a ghost, a princess, and a weary-looking parent, departed around 11 p.m., the house settled into a contented quiet. Chloe retired to her ground-floor bedroom, while Maya and Isabel went to their rooms on the second floor, the old house creaking its familiar, comforting lullaby as they prepared for sleep. The nightmare began not with a bang, but with a silence. In the deepest, most silent hours of the night, between 1:30 and 2 a.m., Chloe was jolted awake not by a sound, but by an absence, the sudden, tense silence of her dog, who had stopped breathing evenly and was now staring, rigid and unblinking, at the bedroom door, a low, continuous growl rumbling in its throat. Then, the backyard motion sensor lights flicked on, casting long, distorted, dancing shadows through the slats of the blinds. Dismissing it as the family cat triggering the sensor, she whispered, "It's just the cat, boy. Settle down." But the dog wouldn't settle. Its fur was on end. And then came the noises. Not from outside. From inside the house. A faint, almost imperceptible creak on the floorboards in the living room. The subtle, metallic rustle of someone carefully navigating the kitchen in the dark. A wave of irritation washed over her. Not again, she thought, assuming it was one of her roommate's boyfriends paying an unannounced late-night visit, a source of friction in the past. That flash of mundane annoyance was the last normal feeling she would have that night. It was vaporized a second later when a blood-curdling scream, short, sharp, and abruptly cut off, tore through the silence. It was a sound that didn't belong in their safe, warm home, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. Her survival instinct ignited, Chloe slid out of bed, her heart now a frantic drum in her chest. She pressed her ear against the cool wood of her bedroom door. And she heard it, the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs, not the light, familiar steps of Isabel or Maya, but the weighty, ominous, confident tread of a stranger, sent a jolt of pure, ice-cold adrenaline through her veins. She didn't hesitate. She turned the knob slowly, cracked the door, and seeing the coast clear, she fled her room, darting out the back door into the cold, damp air of the yard. Trapped by a high wooden fence with no gate, she pressed herself into the inky shadows behind a large, fragrant rosemary shrub, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. She watched a figure, a dark, male silhouette, manipulate the blinds in a front window before crawling out into the night. She couldn't see his face, but the shape and movement were unmistakably male, and he moved with a chilling, unhurried purpose. Just as she began to process this, a second scream pierced the air. This one was different, weaker. A guttural, desperate cry for help that was choked off almost as soon as it began. "Help me!" It was Maya's voice. The voice of the fighter, now reduced to a terrified whisper. Terrified but desperate, Chloe made a fateful decision. She rushed back inside, the warmth of the house now feeling oppressive and dangerous. She scrambled to the kitchen, her hand fumbling for the landline phone, her only thought a frantic, internal scream for the police. She lifted the receiver to her ear, only to be met with a hollow, toneless buzz. The line was dead. A cold, paralyzing dread washed over her, turning her limbs to lead. With no other option, she ascended the stairs, each step a mile, the air growing thick and heavy with the unmistakable, metallic, coppery scent of blood, a smell she would associate with horror for the rest of her life. The scene that greeted her at the top of the landing would be seared into her memory forever, a waking nightmare from which there was no escape. Isabel's door was ajar. Inside, the room was a chamber of horrors. Isabel herself lay face down in a pile of her own clothes, her body a canvas of brutal, deep stab wounds, the vibrant, cheerful colors of her pajamas now darkened and stained with a horrifying crimson. In the adjacent room, Maya was crouched behind her bed, clinging to the faintest threads of life, her eyes wide with shock and pain, her mouth slightly agape, the floor around her slick with a shocking volume of blood. Chloe's mind, unable to process the scale of the horror, went blank with pure, unadulterated panic. She stumbled back downstairs, her vision tunneling, and scrambled into her room, her hands trembling so violently she could barely grab her cell phone. It was 2004. Phone batteries were notoriously unreliable, and in the comfort of a home with a landline, they were often neglected. As she frantically whispered the address and the unfolding horror to the 911 operator, her voice a strained, terrified whisper, the screen flickered, beeped a weak protest, and died. The call dropped. Alone, in a house she now believed the killer might still be lurking in, surrounded by the overwhelming evidence of a brutal double murder, she did the only thing she could. She ran back into the cold night, her voice tearing through the neighborhood silence, screaming for a neighbor, for anyone, for God to help. By the time police and paramedics arrived, their flashing lights painting the quiet, respectable street in frantic, alternating pulses of red and blue, it was too late. Isabel Dubois and Maya Sharma were pronounced dead at the scene. The House of Dreams had become a tomb. The investigation that followed was massive, thorough, and deeply frustrating. Chloe, the sole survivor, was deep in a state of traumatic shock, her memory fragmented and unreliable. The crime scene, however, told a grim, silent story to those who knew how to listen. Over 200 pieces of evidence were meticulously collected and bagged. The killer's point of entry was a broken kitchen window, a single, precious shard of glass containing a minuscule drop of his own blood. In the yard, scattered near the window, were several cigarette butts, a specific, relatively rare brand called Camel Turkish Gold. This was not a robbery. Laptops, wallets, and jewelry were left untouched. This was targeted. Personal. The initial theory centered on Isabel. She was the newcomer, the one with a past, the one who had been on a handful of blind dates since arriving in Napa. Police theorized a rejected suitor from one of those dates had become unhealthily obsessed. For 11 long, agonizing months, the case grew colder, the file thicker with dead ends. The DNA from the blood drop revealed only that the killer was a male of Northern European descent, a uselessly broad clue in a predominantly white community like Napa. Over 1,500 people were interviewed, their lives briefly interrupted by the specter of the Dorset Street killer. The community lived in a state of low-grade, persistent terror, locking doors they had never felt the need to lock before, looking over their shoulders on evening walks, the idyllic peace of Napa Valley forever fractured. But then, a break. Advanced forensic analysis on the cigarette butts yielded a full, pristine DNA profile, and it was a perfect match to the blood on the window. In a desperate, public gambit, the police released the specific cigarette brand to the media, a Hail Mary pass hoping for that one crucial tip. For Chloe, slowly piecing her life back together, a memory clicked into place, a detail that had seemed utterly insignificant in the before times. She recalled with sudden, chilling clarity that the ex-boyfriend of Maya's best friend, a man named Daniel Kessler, smoked that exact, distinctive brand. What happened next was a twist of almost Shakespearean cruelty and psychological horror. Daniel's own family, hearing the news and connecting the same terrifying dots, grew suspicious. They confronted him, the pressure of their fear and dawning realization cracking his calm facade. Under the weight of their suspicion, he crumbled and confessed. His motive was a festering, irrational jealousy that had poisoned his mind. He was engaged to Maya's best friend, Lily, and he had come to blame Maya for every argument, every delay in their wedding plans, every perceived slight in his relationship. The Halloween night of the murders was, in a bitter, Horrific irony, the date their own wedding was originally scheduled to take place. Drunk and consumed by a rage he had nurtured for months, Daniel drove to Dorset Street to confront Maya. He waited in the shadowy yard, smoking cigarette after cigarette, watching the windows until the lights winked out and the house fell silent. He broke the small kitchen window, reached in, and unlocked the door, heading straight for the second floor with a terrible purpose. In the dark, disoriented and fueled by alcohol and hatred, he entered the wrong room and attacked Isabel in a frenzy. Realizing his mistake, he then moved to Maya's room and killed her. He fled into the night, unaware that Chloe had been a silent, terrified witness to the aftermath. In the ultimate act of betrayal, he returned to his normal life, reconciled with a grieving Lily, and even began planning a new wedding. He had the audacity to invite Maya's grieving mother to participate in the ceremony, to stand at the altar beside the very man who had brutally murdered her daughter. For 11 months, he held his fiancée as she wept for her lost best friend. He attended memorials, he offered hollow, meaningless comforts, all while hiding the bloody, unspeakable truth. Can you even begin to fathom the depth of that deception? To look into the eyes of a grieving mother, to hold her hand and offer condolences, all while holding the secret that would completely annihilate her world? It's a level of duplicity, a fracture in the human soul, that is almost incomprehensible. This was our first story. Our second story transports us across the Atlantic and back in time, to the industrial city of Newcastle, England, in the autumn of 1963. The world was on the cusp of change, but in a respectable, well-kept brick house on Goldspink Lane, life moved at a gentle, predictable pace for Eleanor Vance, a retired 70-year-old headmistress. She was a pillar of her community, a woman of rigorous habit and quiet dignity, her life a meticulously composed melody of comforting routines. Her proudest joy was her church choir. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m., without fail, she would make the short walk to the Central Methodist Church on Northumberland Road, her sheet music tucked neatly in her handbag, ready to lend her clear soprano voice to the hymns. But on Halloween night, 1963, the choir members noticed her empty seat. A faint unease rippled through the group. Eleanor was never late. She never missed practice. Her absence was a discordant note in their harmonious routine. The next morning, the unease turned to alarm for her cousin, a woman who shared Eleanor's love of order. The milk bottles were still on the step, uncollected. The daily paper lay untouched on the mat. Most chillingly, all the curtains were drawn tight against the morning light, a profound and disturbing anomaly for a woman who believed in greeting the dawn. Fear gripping her heart, she called the authorities. When police finally forced entry, they discovered a scene of such brutal, excessive violence it defied all understanding and left seasoned officers reeling. Eleanor lay dead at the foot of her stairs, still dressed in the elegant evening wear she had donned for choir. A nylon stocking was knotted so tightly around her neck it had bitten into her skin, but the coroner would later confirm it wasn't the cause of death. That was revealed by the sheer, overwhelming, shocking volume of blood that saturated the carpet and smeared the walls. She had been stabbed 28 times. The violence was frenzied, personal, and utterly without mercy. Blood was tracked and smeared throughout the ground floor, the living room, the hallway, the dining area, painting a vivid picture of a violent, desperate struggle that had moved from room to room. Defense wounds on her hands and arms showed she had fought for her life with the ferocious determination of someone who cherished it, clawing, scratching, and trying to fend off her attacker until her very last breath. Yet there was no sign of forced entry. There was no sexual assault. Not a single valuable, silver, cash, heirlooms, was taken. The murder weapon, presumably a knife of significant size, had vanished into thin air. And in a house drenched in blood, a forensic team, dusting and brushing every surface, found no usable fingerprints, no clear footprints, no stray hairs or fibers. It was as if a ghost, a phantom of pure, focused malice, had committed the crime and then simply dissolved into the ether, leaving behind only carnage and questions. Over 60 officers from Scotland Yard were brought in, their metropolitan expertise overshadowed by the sheer, baffling nature of the crime. They conducted a fingertip search of the entire area, scouring every drain, every gutter, every grate, every garden shed and compost heap for the missing knife. They dredged nearby ponds and turned over rubbish bins. They found nothing. Over 200 statements were taken from neighbors, parishioners, shopkeepers, and former colleagues. Eleanor had been seen alive, watering her prized roses, at 6:30 p.m. By 7:30, she was supposed to be lifting her voice in song. In that 1-hour window, in a quiet, close-knit neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business, a respected life was extinguished in a storm of unimaginable violence. How was it possible that no one heard a scream, the crash of overturning furniture, the desperate, guttural cries of a woman fighting for her life? The case, despite the most massive and determined effort, gradually went cold, the file growing thicker with speculation and dead-end theories but devoid of any concrete answers. To this day, the murder of Eleanor Vance remains one of Newcastle's most intimate, frustrating, and haunting mysteries. Was it a random intruder who found a door casually unlocked? A disgruntled former student holding a decades-old, festering grudge? A secret, shameful chapter from her past that had finally come to collect a terrible debt? The truth died with Eleanor in her hallway, and the silence has never been broken. This was our second story. Our third story plunges us into the heart of a very different world, Manhattan, 1981. The city was a pulsating, gritty, creative cauldron. In a sprawling, bohemian Chelsea duplex, Robert Shaw, a 39-year-old photographer with one foot in the legitimate art world and the other in the city's more decadent, shadowy underbelly, was with his 20-year-old girlfriend, Melissa Reed. They were having a private, intimate photo shoot, the air thick with the scent of developer chemicals and cheap wine, the creative energy flowing. Then a knock. Not the cheerful, demanding rap of a trick-or-treater, but something harder, more insistent. Then a bang, the sound of a shoulder hitting wood. Then the door splintered and gave way. A group of men, their faces hidden not by elaborate costumes but by cheap, generic, mass-produced Halloween masks, the kind sold in every corner drugstore, flooded into the apartment. What followed was a sustained and savage attack that seemed to blur the line between a robbery and a deeply personal vendetta. Robert and Melissa were beaten mercilessly with fists and blunt objects. The apartment was systematically ransacked, drawers upended, cabinets emptied. Among the items stolen was Robert's own .25 caliber pistol, registered in his name. The attack culminated in both Robert and Melissa being forced to the floor and executed with precise, cold-blooded shots to the back of the head from that very gun. As a final, erasing insult, their wallets and all forms of identification were taken. The NYPD, no strangers to violence, first looked into Robert's rumored involvement in the drug world. He had a reputation. There were whispers of significant debts to unsavory characters and a previous, ultimately dropped accusation of pressuring a model with cocaine during a shoot. It seemed a logical, if sordid, motive, a drug deal gone horribly wrong, a warning to others that turned into a double murder. But then, a chilling and bizarre tip came from within the grim, echoing walls of Rikers Island prison. An informant, seeking favor, claimed that the infamous son of Sam killer, David Berkowitz, already serving 6 consecutive life sentences, had predicted this very murder in precise detail weeks before it happened. When questioned, Berkowitz, reveling in the attention, spun a dark, convoluted tale of a sprawling satanic cult. He claimed Robert had been hired by the cult to film one of their rituals, a human sacrifice, without knowing the full, horrific extent of what he was recording. The cult, he said, became paranoid that Robert had kept a master copy of the footage and was preparing to go to the police. The Halloween night home invasion was, according to Berkowitz, a clean-up operation, a hit sanctioned by the cult's shadowy leadership. The theft of the IDs was a cult signature, a trophy to be presented as proof of a completed task to higher-ups in the sinister hierarchy. Police investigated the tip intensely, chasing down every possible connection. But they could never corroborate Berkowitz's elaborate story, nor could they identify a single one of the masked assailants. Was this the self-aggrandizing ramblings of a serial killer, a pathetic attempt to maintain an aura of dark notoriety and control from his prison cell? Or was it a genuine, terrifying glimpse into a hidden, satanic network that was still operating with impunity in New York City, using Halloween as the perfect cover for their brutality? The truth died with Robert and Melissa in that blood-soaked Chelsea apartment, leaving behind a mystery forever shrouded in the smoke of rumor, the specter of the occult, and the lingering fear that the official story was nowhere near the whole truth. Our fourth story is a devastating lesson in how tragedy can strike with terrifying, lightning speed over the most trivial of provocations. In the Bronx on Halloween night, 1998, Darnell Jackson, a quiet, conscientious 21-year-old data entry clerk with a steady job at Morgan Stanley, was driving with his girlfriend and her young son. The boy was dressed as a superhero. They had just picked him up from a party and were on their way to drop him with a babysitter, a simple, ordinary errand on an extraordinary night. Without warning, a group of teenagers emerged from the shadows, their laughter sharp and mocking as they pelted Darnell's car with a volley of eggs. The shells cracked against the windshield and doors, the yolks and whites obscuring his view. Frustrated by the mess, the disrespect, and the potential damage, Darnell, a young man not prone to confrontation, made a decision he would pay for with his life. He pulled the car over and got out, confronting the teens on the sidewalk. A heated, volatile argument erupted under the dim streetlights, fueled by teenage bravado and Darnell's righteous irritation. Wisely, realizing the futility of reasoning with an angry mob, Darnell decided to disengage. He got back in his car, put it in drive, and pulled away, believing the incident was over, a minor, irritating blip on an otherwise good night. But for one of the teenagers, Marcus Johnson, the perceived public humiliation was a spark to tinder. His pride wounded, his anger white-hot, he screamed at his friends, jumped into his own car, and screeched away from the curb, chasing Darnell down the darkened, residential streets. He pulled alongside Darnell's car at a stoplight, rolled down his window, raised a handgun, and fired a single, fatal shot directly into Darnell's head. A life of quiet promise, of future promotions, of potential marriage and fatherhood, was extinguished in an instant, over a few cracked eggshells and wounded adolescent pride. Marcus was eventually caught in a police sting, trying to sell the murder weapon to an undercover officer. He was tried as an adult and sentenced to 20 years in prison. For Darnell's family, his mother, a nurse, and his father, a postal worker, Halloween transformed from a holiday into an annual memorial, a permanent, gut-wrenching reminder of a moment of senseless, preventable violence that should never, ever have happened. Finally, a story that serves as the purest, most chilling reminder of the sheer, breathtaking fragility of life. On October 30th, 1982, 18-year-old Michael Anderson, full of the invincible optimism of youth, dressed as his rock idol for a Halloween party. Before he left the house, the sounds of his favorite band blaring from his bedroom, he ruffled his younger brother Andy's hair and kissed him on the forehead. "Have a good time trick-or-treating, kid," he said with a brotherly grin. They were the last words he would ever speak to him. Michael lost himself in the party, the music, the freedom. He was legally allowed to drink in New York at the time, and he did, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. Friends later recalled him being heavily intoxicated, getting into a minor, non-physical argument with another partygoer that was quickly forgotten in the haze of the night. Tired, drunk, and without a ride, he made the fateful, final decision to walk the 4 miles home alone, setting off just after 3:30 a.m. on October 31st. He was last seen alive by a friend, a lone figure in a rock star costume, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness of the empty, sleeping streets. His body was found later that day in a wooded area near his route home. The case was investigated but quickly stalled. No murder weapon was found. No witnesses came forward. No motive was ever established. It remains officially unsolved, a heartbreaking, open-ended mystery for a family who lost a son and a brother on a night that was supposed to be about fun, friendship, and forgetting the worries of the world. What happened on that long, lonely walk home? Did he accept a ride from the wrong person, a friendly face that hid a monster? Did he stumble, disoriented, into a different, more dangerous situation entirely? The answers are lost to that cold Halloween night, leaving behind only a family's endless, aching question: why? 5 stories, 5 communities, 5 families, forever marked by a single, shared date on the calendar. From the calculated, festering jealousy in the idyllic Napa Valley to the ghost-like, utterly untraceable killer in the working-class streets of Newcastle. From the potential, ritualistic cult hit in the artistic heart of New York City to the explosively senseless, pride-fueled violence in the Bronx. And finally, the mysterious, utterly heartbreaking final walk of a young man on the cusp of adulthood. Each one proves, with devastating, unequivocal clarity, that behind the plastic skeletons and the fake cobwebs, behind the laughter and the costumed revelry, a real and profound darkness can and does emerge without warning. These stories force us to ask difficult, uncomfortable questions that have no easy answers. In the Napa case, was Daniel's jealousy a slow-burning fuse that smoldered for months, poisoning his every thought, until it finally exploded in a single, drunken moment of insanity? Or was it a spontaneous eruption of rage that he then had to compound with a lifetime of monstrous, calculated lies? In Newcastle, who could have harbored such deep, personal, and violent hatred for a retired schoolteacher, a woman who seemed to represent order and decency? And how did they commit such a bloody, frenzied act and leave not a single trace of themselves behind, becoming a true ghost in the machine? And in New York, do you believe David Berkowitz's cult story held a grain of terrifying truth, a window into a world we rarely see? Or was it all a convenient, manipulative fiction, a final act of performance from a man who craved notoriety above all else, using a real tragedy to amplify his own monstrous legend? I truly want to hear from you. Which of these cases resonates, or rather, which one haunts you the most? Which questions keep you up at night? Leave your thoughts, your insights, your own theories and reflections in the comments below. Let's continue this difficult but necessary conversation. Let's ensure these stories, and these victims, are not forgotten as mere headlines. And once again, I'm genuinely curious. Let me know where you're joining this discussion from today. Your perspective, from your corner of the world, is valued. If you found this journey into the true, lasting darkness that can fall on Halloween compelling, if you believe in remembering these victims not as statistics, but as the complex, hopeful individuals they were, and if you believe in dissecting these tragedies to better understand the complexities of the human condition, the jealousy, the rage, the secrets, the fragility, then you've found your home here. Help us bring more of these important, if profoundly difficult, narratives to light by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell. By engaging with these stories, we do more than just consume true crime. We ensure that these lives are remembered. We participate in a larger dialogue about community, mental health, safety, and the pursuit of justice, however elusive it may sometimes be. Stay aware. Stay compassionate, stay curious, and thank you for watching.